So I'm a huge fan of arborist wood chips on the allotment and in the garden, and I like them for quite a few reasons and in a few different scenarios, and I don't like them in others. So I'm just going to use this video just to go through what my preferences are. My favourite place to use them is on the paths. I think they're absolutely ideal for paths, and I'll go through the reasons. So the first one is they just make a lovely spongy surface to walk around, and if you're walking around your allotment a lot, it's just really nice to have that kind of spongy surface underfoot. It's great for the joints and the ligaments and all that sort of thing. It dries out really quickly on the surface, so it's great for things like kneeling down on it and things like that. You don't get muddy or anything like that. When it rains, it kind of soaks up the water and kind of holds the water, and again that means you don't get such rapid floods, and you can generally even walk on a quite saturated wood chip path, sort of 3 or 4 inches, and not really get wet. I mean, I just wear trainers all the time on my allotment. I've never worn Wellingtons or anything like that. Through all the floods and everything, it's been completely navigable on my plot, so I really like it for rainy winters. And I also really like the fact that in summer it locks in all the moisture in the paths. Now, I've got a lot of paths on my plot, and so there's a lot of area where those wood chips are holding water in the ground. And by comparison with, for example, a grass path, that makes a huge difference. Grass is taking loads and loads of water out the ground. Wood chip is locking all that moisture in. Now, over time, of course, that wood chip all rots down, and all that goodness that's in all that wood, and there's a lot of it, especially in arborist wood chips, which come from all different sources, all different types of plants and things like that, and trees, of course. All that breaks down and gradually gets incorporated down into the soil, and the worms will and soil microbiota will redistribute that within the soil network, and it will eventually get incorporated into your beds. And the final few things I like about it: I love the way it looks and I love the way it smells. So there's just an enormous array really of benefits, and of course it suppresses the weeds, and you don't need to water it like you would if you had a grass path. Of course, if you had paving slabs, they're pretty good as well. I have a massive, not massive, I have a main path that is paving slabs on my plot, and again, I love that for the fact that there's just no wear and tear on it. And how much wood chip do I put down? About 2 inches of wood chip every 2 to 3 years, and it costs me to do my plot about £60, so it's about £20 a year, and I consider that a really good investment, with all the fertilizer effectively that I'm adding into the ground. And so that is about 3 ton of nutrients, carbon and all the other minerals and everything that are being added into the ground every 2 or 3 years. And it's a pretty good deal. Now, I also really like it on my perennial beds, so things like strawberry beds, underneath trees, underneath fruit bushes, gooseberry bushes, things like that, underneath my apple trees and my cherry trees and my perennial flower borders and that sort of thing. And mainly I'm using that to feed the soil and to suppress weeds and to lock in moisture, because none of the perennial beds get watered. I don't use it on my annual beds, and the reason I don't use it on my annual beds is because I've got nowhere for it to rot down. It takes a long time for it to rot down to make effectively compost, and probably about 3 years, and even then you would need to turn it probably a couple of times over those 3 years, and that's a lot of space on the allotment that would be dedicated to storing wood chip and letting it rot down. I just don't have that. But if you can get a source of wood chip that is rotted down, then that might be a great option, although maybe I might still leave it for a year depending on how well rotted it is. If it's really nicely rotted, then you can use it as a surface mulch, again 1 or 2 inches, and it might be great under, for example, brassicas, winter brassicas, things like purple sprouting broccoli, things like colettes, Brussels sprouts, things like that. Probably great under those. As I say, Other than that, I prefer to use compost on my annual beds. It's just so much easier to plant through, has most of the same benefits, but it's just a lot easier to work with when you're planting modules or seeds in the ground. You are trying to get hold of wood chip is pretty difficult, especially for free. Basically, you've got two approaches. You can ring the landscape gardeners and ask them, because they generally have a source. You can ring the arborists, and sometimes you can get it from them. Often around here, they all give it to the golf courses, because the golf courses consume a huge amount of it. Or they give it to the landscape gardeners because they use a huge amount of it, and they can't really be bothered to give it to individuals because it's just too much hassle. Basically, they don't get any money for it. I get it from the landscape gardeners, and it is £80 for 4 tonne. So I think that is a pretty good price. As I say, certainly well within my budget, thanks to all you guys watching videos on YouTube. When you ask for it, this is kind of my thoughts on it. Ask for really woody chip, so without much greens in it, if you're just using it on your paths. And if you want it to compost down, then ask for it with lots of greens in it. And if you can, you can buy it from somewhere that stores it and therefore has different grades depending on how long they've been storing it for, then you might be able to ask for it composted and ask how many years it's been composted. And if it's about 3 years, then it's probably about ready to go and be used on your annual beds. If it's fresh, you could use it on your perennial beds. So that's kind of the way I think about it. And finally, just to say, I have once made compost from wood chip. It took me 18 months, but I did turn a lot of greens into it twice. So, there's a lot of carbon in wood chip, obviously. It was quite a green mix. It heated up really hot, about 70 degrees centigrade. I kept it reasonably hot, but as I say, by keeping on adding greens to it, and the addition of the greens and regular turning did accelerate it, and I got it in about 18 months. But that was a lot of work, and you can't often guarantee that you're going to get a mix that's full of greens. So as I say, generally speaking, I think that if you're getting fresh wood chip, expect to leave it for 3 years. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.